I used to be ashamed of my past and unsure if I'd make it to where I was going. But I knew one thing was for certain. We don't end up where we're going on accident. I've also learned that we can't erase the past or hide from it, but we can learn from it and pass it on to others. So who am I? I'm the definition of a bootstrap girl. Someone who's made the hard choices to pick themselves back up and make something of themselves. And I'm not the only one. My name is Danisha. I'm a mom, a wife, a professor, advocate, queen of my own path, who's overcome abuse, foster care, homelessness, and raising 5 siblings on my own at the age of 24. And eventually I got a PhD. But something that I learned is that I don't know everything. So here on my show, we're going to be bringing in people who know the things that we don't know. Let's get in and learn on the Dr. Danisha Keating Show. Everybody, welcome back to the show. I am super excited to have author Tristian Smith here. He wrote the book Against All Odds. I am excited to just dig in with him on where he came from, where he's going, what he stands for, all the fun things. When you have authors, it's really cool because each author's story is a little bit different, even if we have similarities with us. And I know for myself, like looking at just different opportunities to speak with authors, I always learn something new because everyone's story is vastly different, even if we have some similarities. And no author's story is the same when it comes to writing the book and publishing the book. And I think that that's really cool. So I want, Tristian, I want you to take it away a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we're just going to dig in and talk.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Danisha, for having me on your show. So my name is Tristian Smith. I'm from Columbus, Georgia. I am a former Army officer. I served 9 years in the military. I am a published author, as Danisha mentioned, foster youth advocate, and current graduate student at Johns Hopkins University. I'm currently studying intel analysis, and I also have a previous master's degree in emergency and disaster management.
First, thank you for your service. That is not easy to do. 9 years. That is a long time. And so you also said that, so you were an officer. So what can you explain for someone who may not know the breakdown? Like what did you do as an officer?
So really in the military, there's 3 pathways to serving in the military. So you have your enlisted side, you have your what they call a warrant officer side, and then you have your traditional officer side. So your enlisted side is typically you go to a recruiting station, you go through basic training, and you serve as an enlisted service member. You serve in that capacity. And then warrant officer, you're like a subject matter expert. So you can start off as an enlisted and switch over to warrant officer. But if you literally have one job to do, and that is literally your job for your career. You're not veering to the left or to the right. You're a master of one thing. Whereas an officer, you know a little about a lot of things. The pathway through that is you can also start off as an enlisted, but most people, they go to college, they join an ROTC program in college. They complete the ROTC program, and then on graduation day, they have a ceremony where your loved ones, they put your lieutenant bars on you, and you commission as an officer. So as an officer, you know a little about a lot of things. So you can be sitting in meetings for various topics. You can be planning, you can be doing project management when it comes to planning things for deployments, acquiring resources, training materials, putting training materials together. And you're just helping the organization progress along within their mission. That's basically what you're doing as an officer. You're providing that leadership within the organization.
I wouldn't have known that there was differences. I thought just if you entered in, you just did all the things or could do all the things. I didn't realize
there's a lot more to it.
But it's
that's
the
like
3
the
specific roles that's different to know, because I think when when you get in sometimes to this, like a lot of people will think that they can just travel all over the place, that they have no restrictions, that it's more of like kind of like being a flight attendant. But then when you really dig into it,
Oh,
you're like,
absolutely not.
oh, this is
Mm-mm.
totally different. Like we don't just travel, because that's what the recruiters tell you. They're like, you're gonna travel all over the world and da da da, but they're not like they're
Yeah.
not 100% upfront about it,
You,
which makes sense. Go ahead.
yeah. So, you know, you typically stay in one duty station three and a
Mm-hmm.
half, 4 years, and then you
Right.
get orders to go somewhere else. And most of
Mm.
the time, your orders, your next location is based on needs of. So for me, I was in the Army, so it's based on needs of the Army. So if you're
Yeah.
an HR officer and they need an HR officer in Europe, then they'll send you to Europe, or they'll send you to Korea,
Mm.
or they'll
Got
send
it.
you to somewhere here in the states or whatever. Um,
That
you
makes
know, there
sense.
are opportunities where you can work with the HR people
Mm-hmm.
in the Army, and you can kind of, you know, have a say in where you want to go next. But most
Mm-hmm.
of the time, it's based on needs of the Army.
That makes sense. And that's definitely not, ways that if you're not in it, you don't really know.
Now,
But
now,
it's good to
obviously,
know
as you become more
because,
senior, you have way more say in where you want to go,
yeah,
because they want to
which is
keep you. They want to
good.
keep your, you know, they
Mm-hmm.
want to keep that seniority within the organization. They
That
don't
makes
want to
sense.
lose good leaders. So they want to allow you to make that decision on where you want to move your family, where you want to move your kids,
Mm.
things of that nature. So
That and I mean that is always a different kind of lifestyle than I think people realize, especially coming out of foster care. So, what ultimately, what was the reason you decided to do the army in the first place?
so I so I joined ROTC in college while I was at Fort Valley State University. It started, I think, my junior year. I happened to be walking through the campus. I was coming out of class, and they were having, what they call it. They were having some type of event week for ROTC where they kind of show off some of the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that the ROTC cadets do, and they want to advertise it to, you know, the campus to try to bring more, to get more cadets in their program.
Mm.
And they had this wall climb, and you know, I'm terrified of heights,
I would
so
not do it.
I did the wall climb. I did the wall climb.
Yeah.
I got to talk with one of the ROTC instructors,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a conversation. And you know, the next semester, I became part of the ROTC program.
I love that. So when it comes to, and I know a lot of people may not know of some of the benefits that come with being in the military. What are some of those things in, because I mean, coming from the foster care system, was the military the only option for you to be able to get those benefits, or was it like, yeah, no, I still had those at home, it just kind of was like what benefits did you get from the military versus like by yourself if you didn't do the military?
So, one of the best benefits the military has, and this is across all branches, Coast Guard, Air Force, Army, Marines, is the VA home loan. And the VA home loan gives you an opportunity to get to buy a home with no money down.
Wow.
You're probably, if your credit score is even remotely decent, like I think if it's at least 620, then you're going to
Mm-hmm.
get one of the best rates in the housing market.
Wow.
So like me, so I'm currently using my VA loan now.
Mm-hmm.
I kept, so my last duty station was in Kansas, and I used my VA loan to purchase my home there. The
Mm.
interest rate on that house was a 2.25.
Wow.
So I was able to buy that house, move. I moved here to Nebraska from my job with the Air Force, and I purchased another home here. And so I'm renting out my home back in Kansas,
Yeah.
utilizing my VA home loan.
Wow.
And that's just another way to kind of, it's a hack that they teach
Yeah.
you on how to utilize that loan. Another one is obviously healthcare. Like you see, if you're a civilian and you have like Blue Cross Blue Shield, you see the expensive premiums you're paying.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you're in the military and you're under healthcare and you're on active duty, you're not paying for healthcare. You're getting your
Mm-hmm.
vision, your dental, and your healthcare is taken care of. And then for your family, you're paying like a very small premium for your family.
Yeah.
Um, so, and then like me, I'm medically retired because I
Mm-hmm.
had some back issues, and now all my health care, my vision, and my dental are paid for the rest of my life. So that's
Wow.
like hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of my life that I'm going to save
Yeah. Yeah.
in healthcare fees. But yeah, there are absolutely some benefits to joining the military if you take advantage of them. You
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
education. You have what they call certification credits, to where they give you like $4,500 a year to use if you want to go and get your project management certification. If you want to
Mm.
go and get if you want to pursue an IT career, if you want to go
Yeah.
get your CISSP or your Security Plus certification, they'll you can take a part of that $4,500, and it'll
Mm-hmm.
cover your testing materials, the exam, and you will not have to come out of pocket for that stuff. So
Yeah.
that when you do decide to get out of the military, you have those tools necessary to be successful as a civilian. So
Mm. It's interesting because in high school I was like about to sign to go to the military, and my teacher was like, "Yeah, bro, like you are not made for the military. You don't like when I raise my voice at you." And I was like, "It's true," and it is true that not all of us are made for the military, but I think that we do need to have that conversation as an option. Especially someone who comes from the foster care system, is because it's like there's some training that you get that you wouldn't have gotten unless you were guided, even if you just do ROTC in high school or college. Like that's the thing, is ROTC just teaches you a lot of just discipline. It teaches you, how to work as a team and all this other stuff. And I think that sometimes we just automatically write it off because we're just like, no, it's not a good option for me. And I mean, for me, it really wasn't a good option. I already had a lot of injuries that I was just like, it's not gonna work. I can't. Like I'd be out in a year just because of the injuries I already had. But my teacher's like, I can't even raise my voice without you getting scared. And I'm like, yeah.
yeah, I
So
can
for
understand that.
yeah, and it's very valid. So it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I made a bad choice. But there are also for foster care, just because I want to plug this, is that there's a grant for foster youth that they can get for college on their FAFSA. So if you select that you were foster care, there's actually money that can be opened up from the federal government to us as a former foster youth to pay for school. So make sure you guys check into that as well. There's a bunch of grants out there to help pay for college as well. But if you do the military route, make sure, I loved Tristan that you said, like, make sure you actually utilize the benefits, because I know a couple people who were in the military and they didn't. And they're like, oh, I had all this at like my disposal. Sorry. I don't know why I'm
Yeah, you
yawning.
gotta you gotta be
Um,
proactive, because they're not gonna tell
yeah,
you. They're not gonna force you to use your benefits, because at the end
right.
of the day, the military is saving money if you don't use it. So
Yeah, and it's like that's what it's there for you to use. But if you don't use it, you lose it. Like it's not like it like you just got to use it. So I love that you brought that up. So let's talk a little bit more about your book, though, because I think that's where this is where you went from foster care to the military, and then you wrote a book, and now you're at Johns Hopkins University, and that is a huge like win and success, and a thing that's just an accomplishment. I'm like, wow, John Hopkins. So tell us a little bit about your book. Tell us like what made you write your book, and what do you hope readers get from reading it?
I wrote my book because like you, when you wrote your book, you wanted to shed light on your plight in the foster care system. You wanted to shed light. I wanted to shed light on some of the things that I went through as a kid. And while my story starts with trauma and loss, and all those negative emotions that you attach with those incidents that happened to
Mm-hmm.
me, um, I was able to find purpose. I had good people around me. From the time I went to college, and I was able to find some level of success. um,
Mm.
so I wanted to write my book to inspire foster youth. That, sure, the foster care system is challenging. It is not. I wouldn't wish the foster care system on any kid, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, we have nearly 400,000 youth that are waking up in this you know what they call a system.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to show foster youth that, hey, even though you have these trials and tribulations that you're going through, that it's not the end of it. That this is just
Yeah.
a part of your life, and that you still have a say in how your life turns out. As long as you remain responsible, you make good decisions, you surround yourself with the right people, and seek mentorship. Um,
Mm.
so mentorship is something I hit heavy in my book. The two
Yeah.
most important people in my life are the two mentors that I met my freshman year in college, and
Mm.
one of them is actually reviewing something that I'm doing for my book, to send out to public libraries and child welfare um, organizations for my book, to kind of get them interested in maybe checking out my book. So
Mm.
um, we still talk to this day, almost 17 years later. So
That's great. So how let's talk a little bit about mentorship, because I think that is one of the things that is very hard to gain sometimes when you feel like you don't know anybody. So if you were looking for a mentor, what are you looking for?
um, you want someone that is has some type of success. Um, you want someone that is um, that has achieved a level of success that you
Mm.
aspire to reach. um, you want someone that is patient with you. You want someone who's going to allow you to uh, make decisions, to make your own decisions. Like, they're going to give you advice, but then
Mhm.
give you the freedom of choice to follow that guidance.
Yeah.
um, because again, you have to be the one to live with your decisions. So
Yeah.
from your
Yeah.
from your perspective, the advice they're giving you, it may not be the right move.
Yeah.
um,
That's true.
but you want someone, for me, I want someone significantly older, because I want someone with lived life experiences.
Mhm.
I want someone that's successful. I want someone that whose work I can see. I want to be able to see your
Mm.
success.
Yeah.
And then I want someone that lives by what they say and do.
Mm.
So you have to exemplify all of these good traits and qualities. So
Yeah.
someone that's honest, that's loyal. Um, so for instance, my mentors, Kumba and Lisa. Kumba is the husband, Lisa's the wife.
Mm.
Kumba, he exemplifies what it means to be a dutiful husband, a
Mm.
provider, a protector for his family. He's an awesome father.
Yeah.
He's a great mentor. He provides advice whenever I ask for it.
Yeah.
Lisa, she epitomizes what it is to be a dutiful wife, to be a great mother, to her
Mm.
children. And she's a hard worker. Um, those are the things that, you know in society today, those are things that we don't see a lot of, because
Yeah.
we have so many broken homes in this society, in our country. So to be able to be exposed to that at 18, after
Yeah.
going through so many foster homes, where most of them were single parent foster homes, it was a breath of fresh air. So
Yeah.
um,
Cuz we come from a place where it's like when you come from a broken family, and there's nothing wrong with this with a single foster parent at all, but when we come from a broken family and we're like we don't want to continue this cycle, we have to find other people that are not living in that. And I think that that's such a good point to be like, okay, whatever you're looking for, you have to find in the person that you want to be mentored by. Because I think sometimes we're like, well, success is like the money and the cars and this and that they have, but you're like, no, like it's deeper than that. If you really want like a deep rooted success, it's how are they as a couple, how are they as parents, how are do you, yeah, like they could be successful at work, but what else in their life can you define as success? And it's like their marriage, their ability to lead their children, their ability to lead their home first, and then their careers as well. So that's, I think sometimes when we look for mentors, we don't look at the whole of the person. We just say like, oh, are they really good at this one thing that I want to achieve, which is not bad. But it's like, if you want a lifelong mentor to look up to, I like that you said like, look for someone who's significantly older than me, maybe a couple, life, I don't know, what do they call it, like marks up ahead of us, like, oh, okay, if you want to get married one day, have a friend who is married and has kids, so that you could see what that looks like. And I don't think that that's how we think sometimes. I think sometimes we just are like, oh, that person is, I like the way they talk and walk, and they look successful, but there's so much more to that. So how do you, if you're looking for someone, how do you ask them like, hey, would you be my mentor?
I think first you have to establish a relationship. You have to demonstrate that you're willing to be mentored.
Mm,
Um, because you can have the greatest mentor in the world, but if you aren't willing to receive that information, or you're stubborn or
yeah,
selfish, or you're not a social person to where you communicate with your mentor,
yeah,
then you're not, that mentee mentor relationship is gonna fail.
yeah.
So, like for me, I had to learn my part in the mentee relationship, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously I was coming str- straight out of the foster care system, and
Yeah.
I didn't know how to be a good mentee. So the
Mm,
first few years of our relationship, I would speak and then I would disappear for several months at a time,
yeah.
and um, it took a while for me to realize, hey, if I really care about these people, like I say I do, then I need to be more
Mm,
present within the relationship. So seek out someone that you want to speak to and you want to socialize with on a consistent basis.
yeah.
Someone that, that you are willing to learn from. So,
Mm. I like that because I don't think sometimes it's like, when I think of a mentorship, sometimes I think of like, what do I get from this? What do I, it's all about me. But you're like, no, 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 no. Mentorship's both. Like, you're not really mentoring them, but you're in a relationship in a sense, because you're not just getting what you want and leaving. You're really like, you want to know these people so that way when they give you the advice, you take it for what it's worth, and you take it and say, okay, does how much of this does apply right now, and then how do I make this work in my life if it's something that I want to
exactly.
do. And if you
Exactly.
don't have that relationship built, you're not going to take that information. You're just going to be like, yeah, cool, whatever, thanks, Sally. Like, kudos to you. But if you really want to have that, it can help. So when it comes to like writing your book, what was the most shocking thing, or the hardest part, or um the best part of writing your book, or all three?
So I think the hardest part was having to go back and rehash those memories, that trauma. You had to go back
Yeah.
and relive some of that stuff, because in order to get the details, you had to go back beyond all those places in the back of your head that you
Mm-hmm.
compartmentalized and threw to the back, and tried to
Right.
forget. um but I even had to get my little brother on the phone with my editor,
Mm-hmm.
because he was able to remember stuff that I couldn't remember, um
Mm.
because I don't know if it was me just completely mentally blocking it out, or whatever the case may be, but having to go back and literally think back 25, 26 years ago to events that happened with my aunt and uncle, or specific things that happened, with living with my mother, before
Mm.
she passed away. And being able to articulate that in a way that the readers could relate to.
Mm. I think when it comes to writing our stories sometimes too, I think that it's really important to remember that we get to write what we want to write, but we have to be very careful. I think that sometimes everyone's like, oh, if I write a book, I have to relive that. I have to put all the trauma down. I have to put all the details down. And it's like, you don't. But if you're, it's not that your story is not going to be worthy if you don't put those things down. But what I have been shockingly surprised by is that we can't just put names down. We can't just put like details down of other people, because it actually could land us in some pretty hot water when it comes to publishing and someone else not wanting us to publish that information. Did you deal with any of that where someone's like, hey, I don't want you to put that in? Did you have conversations with people about what should or should not be in the book, like with your brother? Or was it just like, hey, we're just putting it in?
No, I didn't. And, with I've seen that a lot with like people who are in the military and they get out and they write books
Mm,
and from like combat events and they include names in the names, and there was like backlash behind that. But
yeah.
with this book, most of the people whose names I mentioned, um, I I speak about them in a good light. I
Mm,
think my aunt and uncle are the only people I mentioned by name. Well, I mentioned their first names,
yeah.
um, but I haven't seen nor spoken to them in almost 20 years. And my uncle
Yeah.
died; he's dead. So um, he she'll be all right. I have. I'm sorry.
No, it's
The
okay.
fact that the fact that neither one of them did a day in jail for the things they did to me and my little brother is still like
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
flabbergasted at that.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's just hard because a lot of times we're like, well, we can't write our story because they're not dead yet. But I do think, one of the best things you can do is just change their name. Like if that's a concern and you don't want to get like come at or you don't want to have a conflict, just change the name of the person. But I think one of I like that you said most of the people that I'm named, it was in good light. But then there's truth, there's truth that happened where it's like, hey, this person did this and I shouldn't have to hide what that who that was. I shouldn't have to hide the situation. But I do think that there's a power in being able to say, I get to share what I need to share and not be afraid of that. um Obviously I'm not gonna like name like big people who have money it's not like you could come at me, but I think it's really important that I've talked to a lot of people who have just said, I can't write my story because I wouldn't be able to tell it in its entirety without having to change names, hide situations, because even just me saying this is what happened to me, that person would come at me, and that is very valid. I think that that is so hard when you can't tell your story. I think that like what I'm writing right now is part of that. Like we are silenced because people are like, you can't talk about this. And so then we are not able to step into some healing because of the fact that we are too focused on like, well, I don't want to hurt so and so's feelings. I don't want to hurt so and so's feelings. I don't want that situation to come from this. And there was some Facebook or Instagram post that I saw that was like, if you wanted me to share about the good things you did, you should have been a better person. And I was like,
I
oh,
agree. I
like
agree.
you want to be in a book, and it's not for the bad things that you did. Like I'm not putting your stuff on blast, and that's just how I feel. Like when I'm writing, I'm not like trying to get the most shock and awe in the room. I'm just trying to tell a story of what happened, and my hope is to teach a lesson from that. And for me, I did take out names and I did take out like gender of who it was. To I don't want to give that, like I don't want to allude to that, only because I want people to pay attention to the situation, not the
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Because I find that when, like, I don't know, maybe you experience this too or will experience this, but like I find that when I'm sharing my story and I'm like, oh, my mom did or my dad did, people are like, oh my gosh, da da da. And I'm like, y'all miss the entire situation. And this is happening right in front of you. So people just, they don't know what to look for. So when I take the names and the gender out, it has seen people have been like, that situation is horrible, and then it's okay, I know someone else going through this, and they're able to pay attention to that situation instead. That's my hope. Like my hope is that more people see the situation because then they can spot it and help people, versus like, hey, sorry that happened to you, like your dad sucks, your mom sucked, or whatever. But more of, hey, that shouldn't happen. Okay, what can I look for to help somebody else in similar situations? So it's like I see how all of this can come out, but I loved I really like I was like, dang, that person posting about like if you wanted to look better, you should have been better. And I'm like, I understand that 100%, but we live so much in silence. So how when you were writing, how did you break from did you experience when you were writing like, oh, I don't want to put this down because I don't want someone to look at them or like expose them or like what did that look like for you?
My the my only goal for my book was to be as authentic as possible. For me, I have no problem sharing my story, so there wasn't any. I didn't have any psychological issues with putting things that happened to me down. Like
Mm,
it is, they happened. I
yeah.
fought through it. I made it. Those issues don't affect me.
Yeah.
They don't affect me as much anymore as an adult.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be authentic, and to be
Mm,
authentic, you have to be as detailed as possible. Um, you know,
yeah.
so um, I got
I like that.
I got
I
as
think
I got as detailed as possible.
yeah. And I think it's helpful. I mean a lot of people are, they'll say like, "Hey, you don't want to put too much down cuz you know, all the reasons why." There's always 100 reasons why we should not put something down, but there's also one person who needs to know like, hey, I can relate to this person a little bit more. I find it is easier for women to share their stories than men as well. It just is like it just is. It's always been that way where it's like women have a little bit easier of a time being accepted, especially with something like trauma. We have people are like, yeah, that happens, but when it comes to men being abused, or even like as little kids, we don't hear all the stories because, and it's not our right. Like we don't have a right to hear the story. But what I'm saying is like we have heard like men have a harder time stepping in and saying, hey, yeah, I was abused. And yes, this happened to me. And I think it is harder because there's a stigma like men don't get abused. I had a friend who for years was being abused by someone he was dating, and it was just like when he told me, and I was like, I am so sorry. He's like, okay, first I thought you were gonna mock me because that's always what happens with women, and he wasn't a small dude, like he was built. And so the comments he would get were things like, well, you're strong, like you work out, like, well, how did you let her take you out? And it was just like, dude, you guys, like it happens daily. And it's not that they're weak. It's literally like he was like, I was taught never to hit a girl. And so he wouldn't be able to defend himself, but she always would attack him like things like he was sleeping or like all this other stuff. So it was like it was never a fair fight. So it was like he'd wake up to it. I'm like, that's not okay. But people were like, yeah, just hit back. And he's like, that's not what I've been taught to do, man. Like, I can't hit my
Yeah.
aunt who's beating the crap out of me. Also, like half the time we're tiny when it's happening. But I have seen a lot of men say, like, I can't share my story because it's not going to be accepted. So for you to speak to other men, because I can't at all, like, what would you tell them about sharing their story? What strength do you find in being able to say, like, hey, this I wrote this out, and my hope is to reach other people who've gone through it. Like, what would benefit for them from them sharing?
Well, first, I would tell them that you're not going to lose any ounce of masculinity from sharing your story. I
Mm,
feel like I feel like as men, we're ego driven, and we're
yeah,
taught at an early age to be tough and rub some dirt on it, drink some water, and go on
yeah,
about life or whatever.
yeah,
Um, but it's okay to talk to people. Um, I would
yeah.
tell my young men that are currently in the foster care system that holding whatever trauma you have in isn't going to do you any good, because it's going to show
Mm,
itself in your platonic relationships, your work relationships,
yeah,
or your intimate relationships later on down the road when you get older. Um, and your girlfriend, when you're blowing up at her for something that happened to you when you were 12, because you have unresolved trauma, um,
yeah,
she's gonna think you're a nut job because you didn't go to therapy when you should have as a teenager or as a young adult. So, um, I would tell all my men, therapy is necessary.
yeah,
Talk to someone um, because holding that stuff in is not good for you, and it's not good for the people that care about you, um,
Hmm.
and could end up on the opposite end of an explosion from
Yeah.
you holding it in for too long. So
Yeah. And we do see, like, one of the things I want to mention is, like, guys, like, therapy within the foster care system is very different than therapy outside of the foster care system. So if you're able to get the therapist outside of the system, because their goal is just a case note and give it to a judge, and there for me there was no ability to really be open and honest without them being like, you need to be better toward your parents. So I'm
or give you
like,
medication.
or give you medication, which we have
Yeah.
found that foster youth have been highly medicated, over medicated, and overdiagnosed. And it really is like there is a target for men, that it's like I literally was talking to a mom at Disneyland, and her boy was not even 2 yet. He turns 2 in November. Shout out to you if you ever see this lady. But he literally, she got the call that day that they were like, oh, he has autism because he did this, this, and this. And it was like things that I'm like, that's not autism. Like, I have a background in developmental psychology. So I was like, why? And I told her, I was like, you need to get another opinion. My daughter does the same things. Like, he looks just like he's a little bit shy. But she's like, he knows his colors, his numbers. He can do this, this, and this. He, you say, what's this? And he knows what it is. It's fake chicken. And he'll be like, it's chicken. And they said that the reason that they diagnosed him with autism was because he clapped when he got an answer correct. He didn't socialize the entire time with kids. And then there was like one other thing, but it was like, oh, they said because he clapped, it was him waving his hands. And I was like, pause. My daughter doesn't know colors. Like, I'm gonna be the honest mom. Like, my daughter doesn't know colors, but she knows her Spider-Man, Spidey friends characters. She knows them, but she doesn't know her numbers because we haven't like started working with, because she's not even 2 yet. But this mom was so heartbroken, and I'm like, look, I need you to understand that there is a target for boys to be like, that is a thing that is happening, where they're just like, oh, they don't know how to sit still, ADHD. Oh, but a girl does it, and it's like, oh, she's just hyperactive. Oh, she's just playing. Oh, she's just, and it's disgusting to see, because it should not be that way. That in the system, it's even worse. That it's like, oh, you're feeling depressed. Cool. Here's this medication. Oh, you're crying all the time. Here's this medication. Oh, you're being disruptive. Here's this medication. And then all of a sudden, you have 6 medications that you're taking, and no one goes, hey, is it possible that this behavior is because of trauma? Oh, no, that's not it. That's not it. Like, just give them the medication. And we see foster parents doing this too, which is so dangerous. But I do feel like boys in the system have it a lot different, where they're targeted for medication. They're targeted for, like, you can't step out of line. I could cry, you start getting angry, and it's a whole different conversation. Like, you're not being physical with people, you're just angry, and they're like, well, get him on medication, it'll help. It's like, no, get him into therapy. That's not going to get him in trouble with the parent. Like, let's actually let him find like maybe another male mentor that can guide and walk him through why he's feeling what he's feeling, and that person is a safe person, versus someone who's like trying to get information out of them or pin them against the other parent. Or, yeah, I've seen it where it's foster parent pinning the kid against the bio parent, and I'm like, guys, we gotta stop. Like, we gotta sit back. Like, there's too much crazy going on. But I think that is such a valid point of like, y'all got to get into some counseling. It has to be good counseling. It has to be counseling that is trauma informed, because there are some therapists too in the system and outside of the system that are just like, hey, let me do hypnosis on you, let me do medication with you, let me do this thing and this. And I'm like, y'all, like, trauma informed training is so good, but it's what you do with it that makes it good. And that, I think, is where we need to have that shift. Is like, we all know what trauma is. Ask me what why I think people act the way that they do. I'm going to say, oh, it's probably because of the trauma they went through. But what does that look like in practice? And being able to say to other young men, like, we see you, you matter, and we're here to actually help for you, so that you're not 27, 28 years old blowing up at somebody because they said good morning instead of good morning. Like, I've literally seen this happen. But also, I think we need to note, when it comes to men coming out of that, or even women, I feel like it's both sides, is that we have seen a high number of foster care, former foster youths coming out of foster care where they are in the homeless population. They're on drugs. They're in jail. They're in gangs. They're not finding stability, and people are like, we just don't know what's happening, and people kind of put their hands up. But like you said, where that comes out is the underlying trauma that we experience, that if we don't work through, it's going to explode in various ways in our life. So I think maybe we can talk through is like, what would your advice be for the person who's on the other side of it and going, well, it's too late for me to change it. Like they desperately want to. It's not an excuse, but they're just like, it's too late for me. What would you say to that person?
When you say it's too late for what?
Like therapy or healing or stepping into dealing with what happened to them.
I don't think it's ever too late. I think
Mm,
you have people that are alcoholics for 20 years, and then all of a
yeah.
sudden the light bulb comes on, and um, they hit rock bottom, and they realize in order to
Yeah.
get their family back, their wife back, their kids back, and to have that normal that normalcy of life,
Yeah.
they have to go get help. And the first step into doing that is admitting, hey, I'm an alcoholic. I need
Yeah.
help.
Yeah.
And I have to be willing and disciplined to go through whatever steps that AA has for me so that I can come out on the successful end of this to get my family, my kids, my wife, and my life back.
Yeah.
So if sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to recognize that
Mm,
hey, I need therapy.
yeah.
Hopefully, it doesn't come to that. But at a certain point, you realize that what you're doing currently is not working.
Yeah.
The life you're living is not leading to results.
Right.
And so you have to find a support system,
Yeah.
and you have to have people around you that can um, help put you in the direction to where you can be successful once you get out
Mm,
of the foster care system.
yeah.
For me, it it just so happened that my last caseworker as a foster youth, my mentors were her brother and sister-in-law.
Mm,
So when I
mm.
told her I wanted to go to Fort Valley State, she was like, I got the right people for you to meet,
I love
and I
that.
want you to meet them. And so it was kind of like a handoff,
Yeah.
as I was getting out of the system. And they just so happened to be moving back from California after being there from 20 years. They
Yeah.
were from Fort Valley. They were graduates of Fort Valley State University. So, it just fit. Now, I'm not saying that that's always going to be the case. That just happened to be a perfect scenario. But you
Yeah.
have to find people around you that can help you, because there's no one successful individual in this world that has gotten to that point by him
Mm,
or herself.
100%.
So when it comes to dealing with trauma, to dealing with the issues, it's never that bad to where you're just like, it's too late. It's never too late.
Yeah.
It's only too
Yeah.
late if you continue to live that way. So
Yeah.
the moment you wake up and are like, I need help, there are always going to be resources out there for you to
Mm.
get you on your feet. It's going
There
to
are
take time,
so, yeah,
and that's
there's
what
so much out there.
people don't have the patience, because success
Yeah,
takes time.
it does.
um,
But
and people
healing
don't
also
have the
takes time.
yeah,
Both,
patience.
and yeah,
People don't have the patience for that.
it's hard. It's hard to success is a long-term thing. It's delayed gratification. Whatever, if it goes to military school, whatever route you go, building your own business, no, formal education. But healing takes time. And I think one of the things that's really helped me step into what healing really is not just like, okay, I went to therapy and I'm not crying about it today, but it's like being able to look at the situation and be like, I'm not in that anymore. I don't have to respond in trauma. I don't have to do a I'm freaking out moment taking a bat to the conversation, because I'm like, that doesn't have a hold on me in any sense of the imagination. But what I needed more was someone reminding me that time was necessary, because what broke us didn't break us in a day. that it has years of impact. But if I wake up and I'm like, hey, I am done, even if it's not like, hey, I'm an alcoholic, but maybe it's more like, I'm done not having healthy relationships, I'm done not having healthy friendships, I'm done not being able to hold down a job. Okay, I need to sit with someone who can be honest with me. I need to be able to start working through the why I can't hold down a job. And maybe it's there's no addiction. It's just like they, a year in, they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And they leave. It's like that happens. That could be something that's related to trauma. I know I moved so much in my, from 18 to 24, I moved a lot. And so when I sat through like a year of not moving, I like had a moment where I like freaked out and I was like, oh my gosh. And I couldn't figure out what it was. It wasn't like I need to move. That didn't come for like a week later. And then I was like, I have this itch to move. So instead of like uprooting my life, I rearranged the bedrooms because I was like, I need something new, but not new. I need stability. But I had to process that with a friend because I was like, I have this thing where I'm like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like physically where I'm at, like I feel like there's something inside of me that's just like, you got to get up and go. And it was like this fear. And this other person also had moved a lot and dealt with the foster care system and was like, is there a certain time of year that it happens? And I was like, yeah, it's around October. And he like just said, he's like, girl, that's your past. And I was like, wait, what? And he's like, you always moved around October. It was always around your birthday. That was when you were put in the system. And I was like, oh, hold on. Let's talk about this for a second. And he even said, he goes, I have that same itch, but it's in like July. Cause that's when he would always move. It's like right after the school year. His parents were always moving him. So it was this eye-opening moment of like, I don't need to move, but my brain is like, hey girl, it's time again. And those sometimes think that's not an addiction. I'm not addicted to moving, but it was something where internally my brain and my body were like, hey, we remember what time of year it is. Even when you don't remember in a memory, even though that's not the thought that goes through your head, it was exhausting though, because it was just like I would uproot a job then. Because I'm like, well, if I can't move homes, I'll move jobs. It's like, no, no, you don't need to do that. So that like sometimes it's little stuff like that, and sometimes it's big things like alcohol addictions and or drug addictions or fight like big thing gambling. Some people are like, that's not an addiction. I'm like, it can destroy your life, especially when you're taking $500 that you don't really have to take and going and do that. Sometimes it's not the big money, sometimes it's the 250, sometimes it's addicted. Mine has always been food and candy. And it's like, look, like, can we talk about that for a second? Because you say that in a room, they're like, that's not it. And I'm like, no, like I had to recently open up to my therapist about it because I was like, I have this like it's so bad. I started using candy to help me keep awake. So, because kind of, it's like when you're driving, you put air, you open your window. But I started doing it because I was running behind on working, and so I would eat candy. And she goes, "Did you know that like there was moments where I'm like, I need this, I need this, I need this, like desperately need this, about to punch somebody else out." And she's like, "Did you know that the sugar triggers your brain into like a happy endorphin, like that goes through your brain, like it gives you a happy dose of chemicals." So I was like, no. Okay. And then she said that, and so she's like, what you have to do is then say like, I don't need this. And I'm like, oh, that's not fair. Like I like it, but there's times that we don't see it as an addiction because it's not the bigger things. So even if it's something small like that, we could definitely work through that. But I love that you really have said like we got to deal with it in therapy. What other advice would you give to someone who's working through their stuff, for writing a book or sharing their story or anything?
So for me, again, I didn't do this by myself. I had
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
great team around me. So as I was getting out of the military, I just happened to be, I was putting my LinkedIn page together, and I was on my timeline, and I came across this company called Publify Press,
Mm-hmm.
and something told me to just reach out to them.
Mm.
So I sent him an email. I told him, hey, I'm interested in writing a book about my story in foster care. And like 48 hours later, the guy who owns the company, he was like, dude, you have a story. We want to help you
Mm.
write it. So they assigned me this lady. dang, Chloe's her name.
Mm-hmm.
And me and her every weekend for like 2 hours for like 6 months straight, we literally just went through it. We
Wow.
went through all the details. We went through the details and we constantly refined them,
Yeah.
um, just to make it more articulate.
Yeah.
So for my people that want to write a book, first off, it costs money. It
Mm-hmm.
does. If you want to do it the right way, it costs money. So um, if you want to just be authentic, that's once you find the team and you once you find your team and once you decide what you want to write about,
Mm-hmm.
be authentic and everything's just gonna flow. It may take a
Yeah.
day, you know, you may need to skip a day of writing. You may need to skip a couple of days of writing,
Yeah.
because you know writer's block happens, um, and then you know, me and my editor Chloe, we would you know look at the manuscript. We would go through and you know if there was a better way to write it, we would
Mm-hmm.
rehash through it. So it went through probably 5 or 6 different edits before we finally submitted the manuscript for book development.
Mm.
But I'm glad I did it the way I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, to those that are nervous about sharing their story, don't be. Um, there are literally hundreds of thousands of kids looking for inspiration, and we
Yeah.
could always use one more story, one more positive
Yes.
story.
We need
Um,
them. It's not that we could use them. We actually need them, especially within the foster care realm. We need them because there's not enough.
yeah, because we see all the negative statistics of
Yeah.
foster youth. You know, there's literally 1% of foster youth, of the 20 or so thousand foster youth that emancipate out of the system every year that go on to get their bachelor's degree, and even less than that end up going to get their masters or anything post bachelor's. So you know,
Well, yeah,
looking at
because
both of us.
statistically, it's actually 3% get a bachelor's or associate's or certificate. Sorry, for 3% for bachelors across the U.S., but 1% for masters, and then there's
Yeah,
no percentage. They don't even have a statistical number to do like doctorates and stuff like that.
yeah,
It's
because there's
insane.
so few. Because I think
Yeah.
as a whole within the country, we have a country of about 300 and what 50 million people, and six
Mm.
percent of the population has a PhD, or less than 6%.
It's
So
that number kind of hits back and forth. It depends on if you do PhD, EdD, or an other doctorate. There's like law doctorates, there's chiropractic doctorates, but total, with all of them, it's easier to just do it that way. It's 4%. If it's just
4%,
the
yeah,
PhD, it's like two or something like that, 2%. So if you start breaking it down by the degree for a doctorate, it could be less, but it's
yeah.
4% across the nation.
So we live in an economy where a high school education is no longer adequate to maintain
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
quality of living.
Right.
You need a bachelor's degree, and you need a bachelor's degree in something that's going to allow you to make 60, $70,000 a year,
Yeah.
and you know that's in some of your low income areas. You know, your low income states like
Yeah.
California, New York, DC, Florida. You're going to need to make more than that. So
Right.
what we need to do is um, start having or start establishing programs within the foster care system. Start figuring out what these kids are good at. Find out what they're
Yeah.
passionate about,
It's
and
not
start
always about
steering
the
them.
degree. Yeah.
Yeah, start steering them in the direction of what you know career fields they want to pursue
Yeah.
in, so that by the time they're 18, they know what they want to major in when they get to college.
Well, and I
Um,
think too there's a danger because we're doing that right now in a lot of the states that are a little bit bigger, is we're pushing these kids to college and saying like, hey, foster youth, this is your only option to go get a bachelor's degree. And it's like, well, now you've just knocked out trade schools. You've discounted community college. But statistically, foster youth first go to community college because it's more affordable. And it's like a
Yeah.
staggering difference. 75% of foster youth want to go to college, and we only see about 30 to 40% finish FAFSA. So it's like, hey, y'all, like something's going on here. And it's not that they don't want to go to college, it's that they don't see it's too long. Like we're in fight or flight where we are like, well, we need a job, we need to take care of our family, we need to get our siblings back, or we need to be on our feet. We don't have time for
Yeah.
college, but we discount trade schools. I've heard in conversation people being like, military is a horrible idea for you. And I'm like, that person would actually benefit from being in the
Yeah.
military. And it's
Exactly.
not just structure, but more of stability. It's more of, giving them options, that it's like they need the mentorship, they need the person coming in and being good to them and being like, hey, we see you. But I've been in those conversations where it's like, college is the only route, and I'm like, but what if it's not? Like, what if it's not?
No, I absolutely agree. I
Like we
absolutely
gotta,
agree.
but I like that you said, like, we need to sit with that person and say, what is your goal, what do you want to go the direction in, let's help guide you that to that, because that's not a
Yeah.
conversation we hear often.
Because electricians, your plumbers,
Yeah.
your HVAC workers, they make really good money, and no, they don't require a bachelor's degree. You can go to trade school and learn those skills,
Community colleges
or
have them
like going
too.
to the
Yeah.
military. You do
Yeah.
20 years. You join at 18. You do 20 years. You're retired by 38 years old, and you're ready to
Yeah.
do a second career. And you're not
Yep.
even 40 yet, so you're already collecting
Dang.
a check. You're
Yeah.
probably broke, halfway broken from the army, so you're getting a VA check
Yeah.
in addition to your retirement check, and then
Yeah.
you're going to go work somewhere else. So
Yeah.
you're easily making over six figures
Yeah.
at
So it's
38
it's
years old.
about actually guiding the person to where it's like, what do you want to do? Let's guide them to that. Because I think that, like, I've been in those conversations a lot with especially parents where it's just like, well, I want my kid to do this. And I'm like, okay, but what do they want to do? Because you
Yeah.
can be as passionate as their direction as they are if they're going in the direction they want to go in. But you did say something that I want to talk through too, is that you talked about, like, as someone who's becoming, like, you wrote this and you paid for it. I do think it's important to notate that there are some things that we have to be very careful of. So what are when it comes to paying, is that there are going to be people who are trying to take advantage of people that are wanting to share their stories. Like, I've had it happen to myself. That's why I self-publish. I'm doing Amazon this time around just because I haven't seen any. And if you know of anyone, you were like, hey, this person would be good to go to, or this company would be good to go to, that would be great. I'm going through just say Amazon KDP because it's like I know that, and it's cheap to publish through them, and it gets on Amazon where I need it to be. But there are people out there who target people like us who want to tell our stories, and it's not good. It's a scam. What
Oh
are
yeah.
some ways, like, how did you know where you went was different? What were some things that you got out of what you paid for? Obviously, like the you said, was it weekly or every other week that you sat with them for like 2 hours?
No, it was literally every week.
I love that. So tell me a little, like, walk me through the process of what you got to do with the company you got to use, because it seems like it was a good fit. You really liked what you got from it. So walk us through, like, what the green flags were of, like, yes, this is who I want to partner with getting my book out there.
Um, so we went through the process, which was obviously the first part was putting the manuscript together.
Yeah,
They were going to assign. I was going to work with Chloe. Chloe was going to be like my partner in crime throughout all
yeah,
of this, and we would. Um, um, Dang, can't think of the guy's name. I
that's
literally
okay.
spoke to him a couple of days ago.
No
Anyways, the
worries.
guy, we were talking on the phone, and he was like, "Hey, what you're gonna do is you're gonna pay. You pay this now, and then once the manuscript is good and we get it complete, then you pay the rest of this,
Mm,
and then we're going to set you up with Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and we're going to market your book um, throughout 90 different countries.
wow.
And, we're going to have people write book articles on, or we're going to reach out to different, newspaper or companies to write articles on your book. And, we're going to do an ebook, and we're going
Mm,
to do a hardcover, soft cover, and then whenever you're ready, we can do an audiobook for you.
I love that.
So based on all of that and just telling me how, letting me have free range with how I wanted to articulate my message.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then also I listened to Chloe as well. Like I listened to her input. Like she's been doing
Yeah.
this a while.
So it
She's
gave you more of like a not it wasn't hand holding, but it was like you had like you said earlier, you had a team around you, which may you
yeah,
wouldn't get like and I'm gonna be honest, you don't get from self-publishing on Amazon. You don't get
no,
someone to read your book. You do all your marketing yourself. You could do the whole like put it on, it's pretty easy, just like hardcover, ebook, stuff like that. But it is more affordable for someone. Like it's you don't have to pay anything to do it.
yeah,
But if you're someone like what you were saying is like for you, you needed more and you wanted more, so you
yeah,
paid for it. And
yeah,
I think that's important to know is just it's an honest conversation because I've heard so many people that are like, just go to this company. And then they're like, hey, it's $15,000 to do this. And I'm like, I don't have $15,000. It's a lot of money. But
yeah.
what I do have is I don't want that to hold someone up from telling their story when they could do
Oh,
self
absolutely not.
publishing on KDP for now, which is what I've done. I used a different service for From Foster to PhD, and it was like $750 for them to print 25 books and post it everywhere. That was okay. Like for me, I was like, okay, I can do that for this one because I wanted a hardcover book. But the downside was some of the things was like ordering in bulk was really hard for people because it was an off-brand publishing place. So schools couldn't order in bulk, so I had to go find that. But I've learned along the way, like, oh, okay, it would have been really easy just to at that point go through somebody else who was more established, that if I said, hey, this person's going to order 250 books, that they could get that with them in a week or two versus it took 3 months. But the company's not going to tell you that because they don't want to lose you. But I think it's really important to dig into some of that stuff. Like, okay, so dig into the price. What are you getting for your price? Huge thing to ask. Like, what am I actually getting? Then talk to a couple people who like just message people on social media and be like, hey, I have a question. I want to use this place. What are your thoughts? You have a book, would love to hear more about this. Make sure that with any company, it's like, okay, what do they do with bulk orders? Like, how long does it take? Is it turn around quickly? Is it not? That's the benefit with using something like Amazon, is that they are a massive company that someone puts a book order of 30, they're going to get it in a week, versus another company that is like they run Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. There's going to be some more restrictions. So what this means isn't don't use the company. If you trust the company, plan it out. Tell people, hey, if you want this book by May, you need to order by February for your bulk order. Or we find a different company. And I have a company where what I did was I was able to just order a bunch of prints. So I took the book, I did that, ordered a bunch of prints, they shipped it to the person, and we were good to go. So there's workarounds sometimes when we are like, oh my God, there's nothing here. But I
Yeah,
think it really is important to say, okay, what am I looking for? Am I looking for someone who can walk me through the editing process and spitball ideas and be honest with me? And I think this is the thing with what you did is really good, is that it's not a friend. So that person can be honest with you and say, hey, this part is not actually coming across correctly. And there's people that I've asked to read parts of the book that I'm working on now. And I'm like, hey, be as honest as possible. It's not going to hurt my feelings. And then I'm like in the background going, because it's scary to be like, hey, this isn't coming across the way you would like. And that's okay. It's when you have someone who's disconnected from your story, they're able to see kind of the holes in the writing to say, hey, this isn't as clear as you'd like it to be.
yeah,
So there's options. And I love that you said that, because I think there's caution. Go in caution, because there are people who are going to take your money and run, and we've seen that happen. We know people who have had that happen to them.
yeah,
But there are good companies out there, and you just have to find them. Look who else has used them. Talk with people. Talk with them. Have a couple meetings before you establish anything, and then kind of make that decision. Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we end?
Um, so, um, I want, I want to see more foster youth, write their stories.
Yeah, same.
It doesn't have to be, you can wait till you're 35 like I did.
Mm,
you know, where you can do some reflection. You've done the healing to where you can handle going back and reminiscing on all that stuff.
yeah.
But you know, we need more positive stories in the foster
Mm,
care community. We there's too much doom and depression when I'm looking at the statistics. When
yeah.
you know, I'm looking at court cases. So I'm on the foster care review board, and I'm looking at all these various cases, and my first thought is, you know, where is this? What's going to happen with this kid once he's
Yeah.
taken away from his, you know, his parents, or once his parents have terminated their parental rights?
Yeah.
So, um, you know, once if we can educate these kids on how to articulate their stories and write their stories, maybe we'll get more stories.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a 200-page book. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
It
if you
doesn't
want
have
to
to be
write,
good either. Like, you don't have to go crazy over it being perfect. Just put something out there. Do a blog, do a podcast, do something so that
yeah,
we, little people that, little us is, if we had someone to look
if
up to,
you
we
want
can
to
say,
write
hey,
a
that person.
children's series, a children's
Yeah.
book series on, you know, foster youth characters, cartoon
Yeah.
characters,
Yeah.
you
Do
can do that.
something. Just something that also like other foster youth can look at and say, oh, it's not all like us failing. Like there are people out there who are like me who are winning out there finally. And that's our hope. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, that is it.
Love it. I love that. And I think that's like, please, you guys, like, first off, write your stories, but also pick up Tristan's book again, Against All Odds. This is such a beautiful. I love the title of it because it hits differently, and it does hit differently because you are a man sharing your story, which is not something that we get to hear of often. I've only had a few former foster youth that I have seen that are men sharing their stories, and it's just always like, oh, thank God that there are more men out there telling their stories. You guys check it out. Tristan, where can we buy it from? I know you said Amazon. Where else?
Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and I found out this week that it's also on Books a Million's website. So
Hey, I love it.
as I'm
So
doing more googling, I'm finding more places that my book is
I
located
love
on. So
it. So make sure when you buy it and read it that you leave a review on Amazon. That helps us as authors. It's one of the things that helps our book grow. It helps it grow on the list on Amazon, but also it helps other people see that it's not just a random AI generated book. Like this is a real person. But leave a review, please, and reach out to Tristan if you guys want to have him come and speak or sit with us or sit with you at your groups. I know he'd be willing and able to do that as well. Have a great day, you guys. Thank you for dropping by.